Hey, what's up guys, it's Bakes here and thank you for joining me for this episode of my random horror reviews. Today's movie is one I was actually pretty excited to give a rewatch to considering what film it actually is, but I was finally able to find a physical copy to get my hands on. It's a film I have seen a handful of times, probably too many times than what's actually necessary, but I've done reviews for both of its sequels on my channel before, so I'll link them in the description as well. But as I said, going back to finally rewatch the first movie, put a review together, and complete the trilogy. So today's movie is one that I feel like also kind of gets a bad rap. I actually kind of like it to some extent. Today's movie, 2009's The Human Centipede. A pretty notorious, extreme, disturbing gore film. So even though a lot of people haven't seen it, I feel like most people know what this movie's about. So before I get into my thoughts of this movie, we'll quickly run through the plot. So in this movie, we follow these two girls, these two Americans who are backpacking in Germany, and they get invited to this party. So they're driving through these back roads at night, it's raining, and something happens to their car. I think like they get a flat tire or something. So they get out and they're walking through the rain trying to find help. And they come across this house that is home to this doctor. He's an ex-surgeon, and he has this plan to put together a human centipede, and now these two girls fall victim to him. As I said, it's a plot that most people would know, so I might as well quickly explain what a human centipede is for those people who maybe don't know. His plan is to make essentially this pet that is joining three people by their digestive tract. So he's going to sew two people's mouths to another two people's butt and have them one digestive system. So just put together in your brain what's going on there. Pretty gross idea. As I said, it's a pretty well-known plot considering what type of movie it is. So without delaying any longer, let's get into my thoughts of 2009's The Human Centipede. So I was thinking, where do I want to start with my thoughts for this movie? And I thought I'd start by addressing kind of how people talk about this movie and expectations and everything, because a lot of people want to bring up the violence and the gore and the grossness and some of the exploitive factors in this movie, when I feel like it's sort of all blown out of proportion and it's not nearly as bad as what a lot of people make it out to be. I feel like a lot of people's expectations for this movie is actually what the sequel is, because Human Centipede 2 turns everything up to 11, and there's a whole story to why everything got turned up to 11. I think I spoke about that in my review for that movie, but that's a story for another time. When this movie really isn't that bad. Now, of course, take that with a grain of salt. If you're like me, you've seen a lot of horror movies and extreme horror films. You know, a lot of that is subjective, so maybe it's just me and it's not as bad to me. But as I said, I feel like a lot of it's blown out of proportion, and I've literally had conversations with people where they're like, oh, this nasty moment happens, and then it goes into this, and blah, 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 and I'll be like, so what were your total thoughts of this movie? And then they'll be like, well, to be fair, I actually haven't seen it, it's just what I heard. So I thought I'd kind of address, and put in my 2 cents on, some of those things that people bring up. So the first thing that you'll hear a lot is this movie is really violent and brutal and gory. And don't get me wrong, it is. There are moments that are going to make you squirm and everything. But I don't think this movie is, again, the gore and violence isn't as bad as what a lot of people make it out to be. I feel like it's no worse than like a ballsy mainstream horror film. Like, I'm trying to think of something recent, like Saw X. There is nothing in this movie that I feel like is more violent or gory than anything in Saw X. Like, if you were able to get through Terrifier 2, for example, where the gore and the violence is a lot, but it's sort of fun, you should be able to get through the violence and gore in this one, because it really isn't that bad. The next thing that a lot of people bring up is that this movie is really gross, and obviously we went through the plot before. It's a disgusting plot, it's pretty gross, it's pretty nasty, but again, you don't see any shit, you don't see any vomiting, you don't see any of that. A lot of the gross things in this movie is sort of just implied, and you have to use your brain to put it together. The doctor is screaming, swallow it, swallow it. We don't see them swallowing the shit, but your brain is putting together that's what's happening, and there's really good sound in this. Like, a lot of the sound and the gagging and everything is gross, but you're not actually seeing anything that's that bad. The only stuff that you do see that could be gross is, again, the violence and the gore, but again, that's subjective. It's just a matter of what you can actually put up with. And I guess the third thing is a lot of people say that this movie is exploitive, and that's sort of a hard one to argue. A lot of people say it's sexually exploitive because we've got two female leads in this movie, and they're part of the human centipede, and sort of the situation that they're put in, you can see how it could be sexually exploitive. So as I said, it's a hard one to argue, but I feel like, again, it's another one that's kind of blown out of proportion. They're topless in the human centipede, but you'd see a fair bit of side boob. You see nipple a couple of times, but the movie's not making a point of, look, there's boobs out, show the boobs and everything. It's nothing like that at all. Their bottom halves are covered in underwear and bandages, which, if you actually think about the story, it should probably be the other way around, because there's no reason for them to have their boobs out, but their bottoms, like, they need a shit and piss. If they're wearing underwear, it's just gonna make a mess and everything, especially the chick at the back, like, she's just shitting herself. Sorry, I just went on this really weird tangent, and that was probably a little bit too much information, but I really don't feel like it's that exploitive either. I feel like a lot of the stuff that people bring up with this movie is way blown out of proportion. Yes, it's uncomfortable, it's gross, but not nearly as bad as what a lot of people make it out to be. So as I just went through addressing a few things that people bring up with this movie and how a lot of it I feel like is blown out of proportion, we actually got to get into the conversation of, is this movie itself actually any good? And first of all, like I said at the start of my video, I feel like this movie is not as bad as what a lot of people make it out to be at all. I actually kind of like this movie somewhat. I feel like it's a scenario of it being more entertaining rather than it being an actually good movie. First of all, you'll hear a lot of people say that this movie is really cheap. It isn't the highest budgeted movie going around, but it's also not a micro budget. Like, it's not some film in a guy's backyard and his friends are the actors or anything. Like, it's got a decent enough production and budget and everything to, be watchable. But I feel like the issues in this movie all stem from a sort of singular relative problem rather than a whole heap of disasters, if that makes sense. And the biggest issues to me, especially watching the film this time around, is 1, the dialogue, and 2, the scene writing. And I guess I'll start with the dialogue, because that's the one that caught me off guard the most rewatching the movie this time around. Like, the dialogue in this movie, there are moments where it's, like, really fucking bad and, like, really dumb, and so many moments that had me going, like, what the fuck, and, like, what does that even mean? Like, dialogue and words that just didn't make sense, and I'm like, what is that? Like, who the fuck approved this? It's almost, like, so bad that it's, like, laughably good. Like, it was adding to the entertainment factor for me, and it was weird. It really was weird. But, as I said, also the scene writing, like, there are moments that are just so convenient, or for some characters inconvenient, and it was just there to keep the ball rolling, and a lot of moments where I'm like, oh, yeah, of course that happened, or that was really the best idea you could come up with to get to the next scene, or whatever it is. There was just a lot of stuff, like, kind of like the dialogue, that just didn't make sense. I'm like, oh my god, what the fuck is happening right now? But as we get into the performances, I think I can go into a little bit more detail of what I mean on that. So getting into the acting and the performances now, and as I said, this will address in a little bit more deeper detail the problems that I had with the dialogue and scene writing. So I guess I'll start with our 2 female leads in this movie. You'll hear again a lot of people say that they give really bad performances in this movie, and I didn't remember them being too bad of actresses, but in the first 10 minutes of the movie, they're pretty much the only 2 characters that we see, and they're constantly talking to each other. And I was thinking, I'm like, man, maybe they are, worse actresses than what I sort of remembered them being. But then the more I focused in on the dialogue and what they were actually saying, I was going, man, this is, like, really fucking bad. Like, there's only so much you can do as a actor or actress, with the script that you're given. And yeah, as I said, I feel like the dialogue was really poorly written. And I think what really helps and proves my point, once the human centipede is involved and they can no longer talk because of the situation, or even before that, once they're held hostage in this house and, their dialogue is a little bit taken back, their performances become a lot better. Like, you feel like they're genuinely scared, terrified, their screams, their facial reactions, like, you can tell, like, nah, these actresses are actually pretty good. And a lot of people will be saying, like, well, Bakes, like, they're not saying anything, it's easier to act without any dialogue. Not all the time. I feel like their performances get a lot better once the shitty dialogue is actually taken away. I feel like our two female leads do a really good job in this movie. Again, the weakest part is the fucking dialogue that they're given. Now, this human centipede is made up of 3 people, so we should also get into the person who is the A piece of the human centipede right up the front. I don't have the actor's name, but he's the only male in this human centipede. It's this Asian guy, and I feel like he does a really good job as well. But again, the biggest problem is his fucking dialogue. Now, he's speaking in Japanese, so we get subtitles down the bottom, and it's almost worse because even though you can't hear what he's saying, you're reading it, and you're like, what the fuck? Like, how did this get approved? Like, I'm reading it, and I'm like, this doesn't make any fucking sense. Why would he say this? Like, there were so many moments where I'm like, no way he is fucking saying this right now. Like, who read this, wrote it down, and went, yeah, no, that's good, let's put that in the movie. Like, it was so fucking dumb. There is a moment, though, I do want to highlight with his character. When the doctor goes out to find him, the new A-piece of this human centipede, he brings him back home, throws him over his shoulder when he pulls him out of the back of the car, and he's got the tranquilizer dart sticking out of his ass like a fucking cartoon character. It is so fucking funny. Like, first of all, the doctor he's intimidating. It's Dieter Laser, this guy here on the back, but he's sort of skinny and frail, and you can tell that this actor is a little bit too heavy for him, and he's kind of swaying around, and I think it's done kind of purposely funny as well. But he's still got the tranquilizer dart hanging out of his ass because they need to show you, yes, this is how we got him, but it doesn't need to happen. It just looks so fucking funny, and I thought I wanted to bring that up. But that gets us into our antagonist of this movie, the doctor. What's his name? Joseph Heater. I can't say that last name, but he's played by Dieter Laser, who has passed away now, which is unfortunate because he really is fucking great in this movie. And again, a lot of people will be like, no, he's too over the top and cheesy for this movie. If he did not play the doctor the way he did in this movie, I feel like it would fall super fucking flat on his face. Yes, there are moments that are over the top and everything, but it's a movie called The Human Centipede, and we went through the plot before. His performance is fucking perfect for this movie. First of all, I feel like he's genuinely pretty intimidating at moments. Like, he's really fucking scary. And just the way he talks to them and everything, like, it's really gross and everything. But it's also really funny. Like, there's a part in this movie, I had to write this down in my notes. He says, they go, oh, do you live in this house, with your wife? Are you married? And he just goes, I don't like human beings. And first of all, in the story, if you heard a fucking doctor or whoever say that to you, you would fucking run in the other direction. But watching it as a viewer from someone from the outside, like, what the fuck what does that even mean? Like, it's like, you get it, like, maybe he's not a people person, but why the fuck would you say it like that? Like, I thought that was hilarious. But then he's also got that iconic line of one of the girls has a temporary escape, but he finds her, and then he goes, I found my middle piece, because, that's like the most fucked place to be. Like, yes, at the back you're eating double shits, but in the middle, it's fucking terrible. But either way, as I said, Dieter Laser, I feel like he also does a great job as the doctor in this movie. I feel like I've been talking about this movie for a little while now, so I'm just going to get into my last few points and things that I want to talk about. The actual human centipede itself. First of all, a lot of people are like, oh, this is a dumb plot, it's just disgusting for the sake of being disgusting. And yeah, the plot and the idea is fucked, but I feel like at least it's something different. I kind of feel like it's interesting, as fucked and gross as it is. You might as well push the envelope and give us something different, and that's what director Tom Six did. As I said, it's gross and nasty as it is, at least it's something that I hadn't seen before. And I feel like it's a scary idea, of course. The first time that you see the centipede stand up on its own and move around, it's actually genuinely pretty shocking. All over the back of this DVD and a few times in the movie, they say it's 100% medically accurate, which I just find hard to believe. You know, there's so many problems with infection because of what's going on, and problems with nutrition and sustenance to keep the people going. There's other body modifications that he makes to keep them on the ground and everything, and it just feels like a lot of it wouldn't work, but that's just a small nitpick, I guess. You have to sort of suspend your disbelief a little bit, but fuck it, I'm not a surgeon, not a doctor, I don't know what works and what doesn't. I really like the setting in this movie. I really like the house. It's just out in the middle of nowhere. But everything is very clean and routine. But then he's got like weird paintings of like conjoined twins on the wall and photos and everything, because that's what he used to do as a surgeon. So as I said, I like the design, I like the location. This is going to sound really weird, but I even like the fucking yard. I just like that it's not fenced off, and one day you could be hiking and then just walk into this grass patch and see a guy training a fucking human centipede to pick up the newspaper. I just think that's fucked, but I also think it's really cool. The ending to this movie, as brutal and depressing and fucked as it is, I feel like it's dumb and it's not great. Unfortunately, it's a little bit of a letdown ending. Yes, a lot of people will bring up how brutal and, you know, depressing it is, but it's not enough to save it. I'd still kind of feel like it's pretty dumb. What else? I want to show you guys the disc, because when I snapped this open, I fucking started laughing. Look at that shit. Look at that shit. 100% they knew what they were doing there. I fucking almost like cried laughing, fucking pulling that disc out. Couldn't believe it. But getting into my final thoughts, as I said, I feel like this movie is not nearly as bad as what a lot of people make it out to be, in two ways. You know, as I said, I feel like a lot of people blow out of proportion the disturbingness and the grossness and the violence and gore and, you know, exploitive nature. I feel like a lot of that is overkill. But then also a lot of people say this movie is just genuinely bad. I feel like it's not that, and I feel like it's sort of got, in a weird way, artistic value, but, you know, that's, again, sort of a hard thing to argue. I'm going to give this movie, for a rating out of 10, I'm going to give it a 7 out of 10. I feel like in the past, like, it's floated around like a 7.5, maybe even an 8. This time around, I just feel like, as I said, the dialogue really stuck out to me as an issue, like, way more than it has in the past. Like, really fucking bad. But as I said, that's probably just the biggest problem with this movie, you know, the dialogue and what's given to the actors and actresses, and as I said, the writing in the scene. So many things where I'm like, oh yeah, of course that happened, yeah, of course. But as I said, I've done reviews of the Human Centipede 2 as well, and 3. 3's just fucking terrible, but 2, as I said, everything is turned up to 11, so if you have gotten through this movie and thought it was pretty tame, go check out 2, because that one's nasty, and I actually kind of like 2 as well. It's weird to say, but there we go, guys. Thank you for joining me for this episode of my random horror reviews. My next episode will be a review for Valentine's Day, so that will be coming out soon. I should have done, imagine I did the Human Centipede as my Valentine's review. I wish I did that now, but I do have another movie in mind. I'm not going to say what it is, but I'll probably get around to watching that either tonight or maybe tomorrow or something. But hope you enjoyed this review, guys. You know, it's definitely a discussed movie, very controversial. You know, no shortage of YouTube videos on the Human Centipede. So if you have any thoughts you want to share, put them in the comments below, guys. And I'll see you for another video soon. Peace.